You are listening to the continuation of the story. You can listen to the previous part via the link in the description below this video. Happy listening. Next, the casting assistant interrupted in a cold, indifferent voice, not bothering to look up from her list. There was not a hint of sympathy in her tone, not the slightest spark of interest. It was all just routine. Circe sighed and involuntarily squeezed the script in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, either from excitement or from fatigue. She took one last look at the stage, as if trying to remember this moment, but inside she already knew that nothing would change. Slowly, with her shoulders slumped, she dejectedly walked down the small podium, feeling with every step the weight of disappointment fall on her chest. When she left the theater, the dim light of the autumn sun hit her eyes. Los Angeles greeted her as always harshly, mercilessly. The dirty, muddy sun through the smog only intensified the feeling of grayness around. Circe had to squint to adjust to the harsh light, and for a moment she was overcome with a wistful thought. Was all this even worth it? The streets around her were filled with cars, neon signs, and bustling passers-by, but Circe felt as if she was in a vacuum. The crowd seemed distant, voices and laughter muffled. She walked slowly, head down, slouched, as if her shoulders could not bear the weight of unrealized hopes. A warm wind, barely perceptible in the thick air, moved her dark hair, but even this light touch did not bring comfort. "Sorry, madam, sorry. Are you Circe McNair?" A quick, slightly confused voice came from behind her. She stopped and slowly turned around, raising an eyebrow in surprise. In front of her, almost running, was a tall young man who was clearly in a hurry to catch up with her. He looked a little nervous, but his movements showed determination. Her long, black hair was neatly pulled back into a man bun at the back of her head, with a few strands escaping and carelessly framing her face. The thick beard and mustache that covered his chin and cheeks hid his expression, but his eyes, dark and shiny, glowed with some strange, almost manic interest. Circe involuntarily frowned, looking him over, trying to understand who he was and what he wanted. Her heart sank for a moment. Was this some new chance, or just another accident in the chaos of the city? The crowd of passers-by continued to flash around, cars honked, but for her at that moment everything seemed to be quiet. Only the steps of the stranger, who was getting closer, and her own rapid breathing filled her consciousness. She turned her head slightly, intrigued, but remained where she was. Her intuition told her that she needed to wait for him and find out what made him pursue her so persistently. "Yes, I'm Circe," she said warily. "Who are you?" "I'm Marcus Masterson. How are you doing?" he answered politely, extending his hand. She ignored her. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to sell me, but I'm not interested." No, I'm not selling anything. I want to make you an offer." She froze, frowning angrily. "I'm not selling anything either, buddy. So come on, get out of here." He took a step back, and despite his dark beard, she thought he was blushing. "Sorry, I didn't put it that way. I'm not trying to take you off. I'm offering you a role, a job. Are you an agent or something? Look, there's a cafe on the corner. Let me buy you a cup of coffee and I'll explain everything." He noticed her hesitation and hurried to continue. "There are a lot of people around, so don't worry about me. Just listen to what I have to say, and if you're not interested, you can leave. Besides," he smiled at her, "at least you'll get a latte." Involuntarily, she smiled back. He's actually quite cute. When they sat down at a table on the cafe terrace, she took a sip of her latte and looked at him. "So, Marcus Masterson, what role are you proposing?" He leaned forward. "This is a unique opportunity, a chance to put all my acting skills to work in front of a live audience." "Are you talking about theater, television, or what?" "It's actually a new format that I'm sure you haven't seen before." "You have to be a lot more specific." "Oh, I will, but first let me ask you a couple of questions. What kind of work have you done so far?" She frowned. "You probably haven't seen me anywhere. I did a few commercials, but nothing memorable." He gestured to her shoulder-length hair. "Advertising shampoo?" She shook her head vigorously in denial. "Oh no, It's a dead end. Once you star in one such commercial, no one else considers you for other roles. He smiled. You have great hair, though. She ignored it. I also played a couple of roles in one of those true crime shows. The last time I murdered a friend was interesting. When was this? A year ago, she admitted. Anything newer? No, but I storm castings every day. I'm sure something will turn up soon. What if I offer you the lead role in a project that will last 6 months to a year? Who should I kill for this? She asked ironically. I don't think it will come to that. How would you feel about working in New York? Have you ever been there? She laughed. Of course. I graduated from the new school, specializing in performing arts. I know Manhattan like the back of my hand. Then she suddenly straightened up. Wait, New York? You mean Broadway? He shook his head. Off-Broadway, off-Broadway. He smiled. Let's do a little test. He took a quarter out of his pocket and placed it on his palm, handing it to her. Try to take the coin from my hand. She looked at him strangely, then tried to grab the coin. He easily pulled his hand away. One more time, he ordered, holding out the coin again, and again she could not take it. He gave the coin to her. Now you try. Not knowing whether to be intrigued or annoyed, she took the quarter and handed it to him. He placed his hands on the table, then suddenly looked over her shoulder. About, he exclaimed, and when she turned around, he grabbed the coin. You cheated, she accused him. No, I completed the task. The object of the game was to take the coin, and I did it. She looked at him carefully. Let's try again. Hold the coin. As he held it out, she placed her hands on the table, then raised one hand, ready to grab the coin. As his gaze darted to the moving hand, her other hand instantly flew out, hitting the back of his hand. The coin flew into the air, and she caught it in triumph. Bravo! He clapped his hands. Both a distracting maneuver and a sudden move. He smiled widely. You have fast hands and even faster reactions. I think you are quite suitable. She was surprised at how flattered she was by his words, but then remembered how little she knew about him and what exactly he had to offer. Listen, this is all, of course, interesting, but you still haven't told us what we're talking about. He nodded. You are right. The time has come for details, but not here. Here's a business card with your address and phone number. Meet me tomorrow at 10 o'clock in my office. I promise I will answer all your questions. If you like the answers, let's continue. If not, I'll call you a taxi and you'll just lose the morning. He rose from his chair. If you change your mind tonight and decide not to come, just call this number and leave a message. He smiled. But I really hope you come. The next morning, when Circe entered the building at the address Marcus had given her, she found herself in a foyer that looked like a small office space. There was no one there, but apparently the opening of the door set off an alarm because Marcus quickly emerged from the back room. I'm so glad you came, Circe, he said, ushering her into one of two small offices furnished with a modest table and two chairs. He pointed her to a large, comfortable sofa against the wall. When she sat down, he handed her a cup of coffee. She noticed that he prepared it exactly the way she liked it. You must have been confident that I would come today, she commented, taking a sip. Let's just say I'm an optimist, he smiled. He then opened the folder he was holding on his lap. But your profile says you are a person who loves adventure and risks, so I had reason to be confident. Do you have my profile? She frowned. What did you do? Hired a private investigator to follow me? Exactly. Now she was angry. So you already knew the answers to all the questions you asked me yesterday. What else do you know about me? He leaned back in his chair and looked at her calmly. I watched every tape of the show you were on and every commercial you starred in. I have your grades from the new school and also from DeWitt Clinton High School, and I have transcripts of interviews with your friends and ex-boyfriends. As he listed all this, Circe became increasingly agitated. What gives you the right to interfere in my personal life? She was indignant. This is an important role, and we only have one chance, so I need to make sure you are the right choice." She crossed her arms over her chest. "That's not an actress's job, is it? This is definitely acting work, but it's not like what you've done before, I suspect." Then his face brightened. "But also, it pays better than any other acting job you've ever had. In addition, all costs will be covered throughout the entire project." He leaned forward. "If you succeed, you will do very well." Then his tone changed. "But you don't take this job for the money. I think you'll agree, because this will probably be the biggest acting challenge of your career, and because it will be an adventure you'll never forget." He could almost see how her mind processed what was said and the conflict it caused her. Suddenly, she asked, "You said it seriously yesterday I won't have to kill anyone, right?" He smiled and shook his head in denial. Her gaze became harder. "Nothing illegal. If something goes wrong, won't I end up in jail? You will see the line that the law draws, but you will not cross it. Look, the worst that can happen is that you end up back here in Los Angeles looking for your next acting job. Even then, you will be paid for the lead role for 6 months, all expenses covered, and you will have one incredible experience." She sat silently for a couple of minutes. Finally, she shook her head, almost in disgust. "I'll probably beat myself up about it, but yeah, I'm interested." He smiled, but she wasn't finished yet. "But I won't agree to anything without knowing a lot more." "That's fair, I wouldn't expect anything different from you. But before I tell you any details, you need to sign a non-disclosure agreement. From now on, everything I tell you is strictly confidential, and if you break this agreement, I will seriously come down on you." "You don't scare me, Marcus. I've signed similar agreements before." With these words, he rolled his chair to the table, took the agreement, and handed it to her. She read it carefully, then asked for a pen. After she signed the document, he placed it in her folder and stood up. "Okay, follow me." He led her through the hallway and into another door that led to a large conference room. There were photographs on one wall, and he led her to them. She saw a photo of a very attractive woman about her age. Next to the woman was a photo of a man who seemed a little older. Both were well-groomed and dressed in expensive clothes. Meet Cassandra Simmons, who also goes by the aliases Emma Blackstone and Lorelei Hamilton. She is 29 years old, but she looks at least 5 years younger. The gentleman next to her is Stephen Benedict, also known as Samuel Blackstone and Robert Hamilton. He is 36 years old and in great shape. Together, they form one of the most sophisticated pairs of fraudsters operating today. He handed her a piece of paper. "Here is a list of frauds they are suspected of over the past 10 years. If you look closely, you will see a pattern. At first, they were ordinary pickpockets, but quickly moved on. One of them would become romantically involved with a vulnerable victim, seduce her, and then make off with what he could take. Initially, it was a simple robbery: seduce a lonely or lustful member of the opposite sex, and then take all the money out of his wallet or purse at night. They then moved on to more complex scams. After gaining access to bank accounts, they emptied them before disappearing. Victims often hesitate to contact the police because they could not believe that their lover was a thief. Recently, they have moved on to even bigger schemes. Over the course of several months, they develop an affair with the victim, get married, and when the time comes, they empty their joint bank accounts, take out credit card loans, and mortgage their houses before running away. One poor victim, a woman, was forced to declare bankruptcy. He sat down next to her and pointed to the last entry on the list. "But the risk with such scams increases. Because long-term schemes are expensive, they were forced to choose wealthier victims. But such people are a more dangerous target. A suspicious relative, a vigilant bank employee, or even a victim asking too many questions can jeopardize the entire game. They almost got caught 4 years ago in Chicago, and we think that's when they switched to a new way of doing things. 2.5 years ago, Cassandra seduced a young, successful programmer in Silicon Valley. She turned his head and talked him into proposing so quickly that he didn't have time to protect his assets with a prenuptial agreement. Soon after her honeymoon, she left the city, and her partner Benedict got the poor guy drunk and slipped him a woman of easy virtue. When Cassandra found them together in bed, the man could not do or say anything. The speedy divorce netted them half of his assets, and it was completely legal, though hardly ethical. He stood up and began to walk around the room. But this time they chose the wrong victim, because when he realized what had happened, he brought me in, and I intend to make sure that they answer for it. But why not just go to the police and leave it to them? He shook his head. Firstly, it will be difficult to prove that a crime has been committed. The victim and the woman were legally married and legally divorced. By law, she was entitled to half of the joint assets. There is nothing for the police to get hold of. But in the process, they broke his heart, humiliated him, and robbed him of a large sum. He wants them to get the punishment they deserve. What about all those other victims on your list? I spoke to several of them. Many of them were too embarrassed to have been fooled like that. They would prefer not to remember this. Moreover, the crimes were committed in different cities and states, so local cops are not eager to waste time and effort catching scammers. Such crimes are not a priority unless it is a mass crime or involves a famous person. It looks like this is something that should be handled by the federal authorities. Yes, but in truth, federal resources are focused on tax and financial fraud. Unfortunately, scammers like these too often operate under the radar. Unless they're caught red-handed, they usually get away with it. It's not fair. I agree, he nodded. But this time I intend to hunt them down and put an end to their scams. He looked at her carefully. But for this, I will need your help. Okay, but... He raised his hands to interrupt her. I know you have a lot of questions, but I'm already hungry. How about we grab a bite to eat, and we can talk over lunch? They found a small Mexican restaurant and took their food out onto its shady terrace. Okay, he said after taking a few bites. What do you want to know? She surprised him. I want to know, what is your motivation? Who are you really? And how did you get involved in this matter? He laughed. That's already 3 questions. Then his face became serious. In fact, I am one of those who searched for myself for a long time. I joined the army and ended up in the military police. When I returned, I tried different things. I even thought about becoming an actor like you, but it didn't work out for me. In general, one day I saw an advertisement for a vacancy in a small detective agency. The owner was already aged and needed help with field work. I took this job on a whim and realized I had a talent for it. When he retired, I took matters into my own hands, and here I am. She looked at him with disdain. So you take pictures of unfaithful wives and husbands? It happened, he admitted. But now I mainly deal with cases of missing people and property. My partner and I offer clients the 3 I's: research, exploration, and in some cases, intervention. This case includes all 3 aspects. Okay, that brings me to my next question. How did you get involved in this investigation in the first place? His face became serious. We'll talk about this another time. She was not satisfied with this answer, but he refused to talk further. Instead, he spent the rest of lunch entertaining her with stories about other cases he was working on. His stories were full of funny incidents with self-irony, and she could not help but appreciate his sense of humor. When they returned to his office, he led her back into the conference room. But instead of sitting down, they walked to a rather large carpeted area with no furniture. Remember our little game in the cafe? He asked. You were quick and smart when you stole the quarter out of my hand. Now I want you to do the same with my wallet. What? She was surprised. I'm serious. This is something you'll need to be able to do. She rolled her eyes, and then, after a moment of hesitation, walked closer and tried to pull the wallet out of his back pocket. The wallet partially came out and then fell to the floor. Now he rolled his eyes. Well, it was terrible. What should I have done? You knew what I was going to do, and you were waiting for it. Exactly, he admitted. Now let's try it with you. He easily slipped his wallet into her back pocket. Then he took a few steps back and began to walk past her. Just as he was passing by, he suddenly touched her through her t-shirt. "Hey!" she screamed. "You have no right." She fell silent abruptly when he raised his wallet with a smile. The key to successful pickpocketing, as with any scam, is distraction. If you make a person distracted, it will be much easier to do what you want. She stared at him, not knowing whether to be angry or admired. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I got your lesson, even though you did manage to grope me a little." "Sorry," he apologized. "I hope I didn't hurt you." "You pinched me too much," she complained. "I think I'm going to get a bruise." With these words, she calmly lowered her low-cut t-shirt, exposing her bra cup. She then lowered it, and he watched in surprise as she asked, "See anything?" "No." After that, she covered herself again, and at the same time showed his wallet in her other hand, sticking her tongue out at him. He could only nod in admiration. "I think you have successfully grasped the concept of distraction," he said dryly. "Now let's try again, and I'll show you some techniques for stealth extraction." They practiced for another hour, and then he said, "That's enough for today, but we'll have to practice several times a day. If our operation goes the way I see it, you will need to become a real professional." He led her back to the conference table, and they continued to study the dossiers he had collected on Stephen and Cassandra. "When we meet this couple, we will have to act as if we don't know them. But we need to understand as best we can how they think, their preferences where we know that, and how they are likely to act in certain situations. This means that we will have to return to these materials again and again." "But what exactly are we going to do?" "We'll get there soon. For now, let's focus on preparation and skill development." She was not happy with this, but he was adamant, and she finally decided not to bring up the issue for now. "If it turns out I can't stand it, I can always leave," she thought. They continued this routine over the next 2 days, practicing pickpocketing and testing each other's knowledge of their targets. Marcus also added an overview of surveillance techniques and the use of covert communication methods. She was especially impressed with the Bluetooth earphone he showed her. It was smaller than a hearing aid. "I can whisper sweet words in your ear, and no one will know about it," he joked. Circe just rolled her eyes. The next day, he introduced her to spy tricks: messages, signals, hiding places, code phrases, and much more. "You and I will have burner phones, and in most cases that should be enough. But there may be situations where we can't call each other, and we'll need a way to convey information without arousing suspicion. Likewise, there may be times when we need to meet or exchange things, and this requires signals, places, and so on." She shook her head doubtfully. "Sounds like something out of a John le Carré novel. Is this really necessary?" He grinned. "Probably not, but if we need to, we may not have time to develop it locally. Preparation is everything in our work." He then coached her through everything they discussed until he was sure she had it all figured out. The next morning, they had another long training session, but Circe noticed that Marcus seemed somewhat nervous. They took a break for lunch, but when he continued repeating the material again, her patience ran out. "I don't understand. Looks like he's stalling for time." Finally, she got tired of it. "Come on, Marcus, I know this stuff, and you know I know it. But I don't know what we're going to do with him. If you don't trust me enough to tell me the plan, you need another partner." Marcus' face became serious. "Okay, Circe, you're right. Let's go to my office and talk about this." When they entered his office, he sat down at the table, but almost immediately stood up and began nervously pacing around the room, which she watched with interest. He's definitely biding his time. Why is he so nervous? Finally, he stopped and took a deep breath. "Before we discuss the plan, there is one more requirement for this job that we haven't talked about." He couldn't look at her. "The thing is," he continued, starting to walk again, "if you want to refuse, I understand. It will be without offense, without consequences. Of course, I'll pay you for all the time you've already wasted. You definitely deserve it, and—" "Tell me straight," she interrupted him in irritation. "What do you want from me?" He looked up. "Okay, so here's the big question. Can you have sex with someone you don't feel anything for? What? If we're going to fool these crooks, you're going to have to seduce Benedict. So my question is, can you start and maintain a sexual relationship with someone for whom you have no feelings and perhaps even antipathy? She sat back in her chair, shocked. You want me to have sex for money? Do you want me to become a woman of easy virtue? No, no, he protested. It's not like that. I know it sounds bad, but... He shook his head helplessly. It's the only way. She crossed her arms over her chest and sat there, angry and resentful. I can't believe he's asking me to do this. If I do this, I won't be any different from a woman of easy virtue. But while he waited silently, she continued to think. I should have seen this coming. These scammers have sex with their victims to gain their trust. To deceive them, obviously, you will have to do the same. But can I do this? Gradually, she began to calm down and see the logic in it. Marcus chose me not because I am a woman of easy virtue, but because I am an actress. And I'm a good actress, even if those casting directors don't know it. I've done love scenes before, and some of them were quite explicit. If I want, I can step into this role. And damn it, I can play it. She glanced through the door at the photo board Marcus had hung in the conference room. These people are professional scammers. They are not so easy to carry out. Benedict definitely won't buy a chaste goodnight kiss. I think I understand why this might be the only option. Crap, she remembered her life before meeting Marcus. Stupid commercials, cameo roles, endless refusals. I don't want to go back to this. She took a deep breath. Well, if I'm going to play Mata Hari, I'm going to have to seduce the enemy. She looked at Marcus. Okay, I agree. She expected him to feel relieved, but he looked even more nervous. Okay, he finally said, prove it. Make love to me right here, right now. She stared at him, and he began to wonder what was on her mind. When she continued to remain silent, he was almost sure that she would tell him to go to hell. Suddenly, she stood up slowly. Something has changed in her. It was as if some kind of switch had turned on inside her. He could not understand exactly what had changed, but now there was a bright sexual energy in her gaze, in the way her body moved. It was the most amazing sight he had ever seen. A slight smile appeared on her lips, and she did it. Later, placing her hands on her hips and tilting her head slightly, she asked, So, did I pass the test? He stared at her with admiration. Did you play this? Certainly. Isn't this what you wanted to see? He shook his head, impressed and secretly disappointed. I can say one thing. Benedict will not stand a chance. So I get the job? Absolutely. Okay, then I want to hear the whole plan. After they got dressed, they returned to the conference room and Marcus walked over to the empty board. Like a university professor, he began to explain each step of the plan in detail. Sears listened attentively, asking questions from time to time, but mostly just taking in his words. At some point, he stopped and ordered pizza. When it arrived, they quickly ate it while he continued to explain the details of their upcoming scam. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and said with a smile, Well, it looks like I'm not the only one who will have to use my body for this little operation. You will have to do this with Cassandra too. She tilted her head to the side. You might even like it. He grimaced and then became serious. If we want this to work, we'll both have to be convincing. It's like an actor getting into character. You will have to become a young, aspiring scammer who needs partners. And I am a provincial disappointment in life, looking for love. If even one of us fails, we will scare them away. She nodded. I can play it. Great, he said emphatically. And now it's late, so let's finish for today. Tomorrow I have a surprise for you. Same as the surprise you gave me today. He blushed deeply. No, no, nothing like that, I promise. The next morning, when she arrived at the agency, he met her in the lobby. Don't get too comfortable, because you'll have to go out again soon. He handed her a credit card. You are about to undergo a transformation. Transformation? For what? Is there something wrong with me? Not at all, he assured her. but it's possible that one of our targets saw you in a commercial or on that crime show. We have to make you look completely different. And how should I change? How should I look? He shook his head. You and your stylist will decide that. All I can say is that it should be fashionable, modern, and attractive to Stephen, and change enough that if Cassandra or Stephen saw you on TV, they wouldn't recognize you. Fine. Where am I going? You have an appointment at Carousel in Beverly Hills in an hour. She opened her mouth in surprise. How did you arrange this? Do you know how much this place costs? He grinned. Oh yes, I am well aware. A smile appeared on her face. It looks like it'll be fun. And that's not all, Marcus continued. After the transformation, you have to go shopping. You'll need things for your trip to New York. You don't need a full wardrobe. You can buy everything you need when we get there. But you need to pick out something stylish for this evening, because we are having dinner with our client at the Spago restaurant. Her mouth opened again in surprise. Are we working for Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates? No, but you're thinking in the right direction. Okay, that's enough questions for today. You need to go get your hair cut. When you're done with the beauty salon and shopping, meet me here. She nodded, again wondering what she had gotten herself into. But no matter what happens, I'm going to enjoy this day. Carousel Salon, shopping in Beverly Hills, Spago restaurant, damn it. When Cersei returned to the detective agency, it was almost 5:30. She was wearing a flirty floral dress that she found in a small store on Rodeo Drive. It cost a fortune, but she decided that if their client could afford Spago, then he could afford this dress too. Her fingers kept touching the new hairstyle. It was bold, completely different from what she had worn before. The stylist insisted that she keep her natural burgundy color, but cut off large chunks of it. The hair on the right was very short, and on the left it was long, flowing over the left eye in a stylish wave. It took her great effort not to rush to the mirror to look at herself again. The office door opened and Marcus appeared in a very ordinary suit and tie. But Cersei froze when she saw his face. He had shaved off his beard and mustache. What was equally surprising was that his bun was gone and his hair was neatly trimmed and combed to one side. He, in turn, stared at Cersei with some semblance of admiration. You look completely different, he breathed. Is it bad in a different way? No, no, he shook his head. It's good differently. You actually look amazing. I never thought short hair would suit you, but now that I see it, it looks amazing. You look like an anime warrior princess. Thank you, sir, she said with an exaggerated curtsy. Then she looked at him more closely. It's a pity I can't say the same about you, to be honest. I liked the old Marcus much better. Hey, this is the best $20 haircut from Supercuts, and I guess it took less than 1/10 of the time you spent on yours. Then his smile faded. Seriously, do I look like a guy who just came from a farm in Arkansas? This is the image I wanted to create. She tried to forget what he was like before. Actually, I think it's perfect. It screams naivety and simplicity. Thank you, I think, he said. Anyway, our transport has arrived, so it's time to move out. He pointed to the limousine parked at the curb. When they arrived at Spago, Marcus spoke to the head waiter, who led them to a table at the back, where a man was already waiting for them. Cersei watched as Marcus walked over and hugged him. While their master joked about Marcus' new appearance, Cersei watched them and asked, "Are you brothers?" "See, little brother, I told you she was smart," Marcus said. "Cersei McNair, let me introduce you to my brother, Seth Masterson. He was the one who fell into the scam, and now you understand why he asked me to help him." Over dinner, Seth explained how Lori, as he knew her, had skillfully seduced him, lured him into marriage, and then, along with her accomplice, set him up for divorce. Listening to him, Cersei could sense the anger and bitterness in his voice, but his eyes betrayed the pain he still felt. When he fell silent, she suggested, "You really fell in love with her, didn't you?" "I feel like a complete fool, but yes, I fell in love. It still hurts to be betrayed in that way. And that's why you want us to help you get your money back." He shook his head. I don't want them to leave them, but that's not the main thing for me. He took a sip from his glass. By the time the divorce was finalized, Lori and her partner walked away with $500,000 of my money. I was shocked. All I could do was bury myself in work. The bad news is that I practically became a recluse, working around the clock, eating and sleeping at my desk. The good news is that during this time I started another game software company and managed to create an online multiplayer game that is still #1 in the rankings 18 months after its launch. Even better, earlier this year I accepted an offer from one of the largest technology companies to buy my small company for $248 million. So $500,000 is not my main concern. He folded his hands and leaned across the table towards her. My motivation is to get my pride back. That woman Lori or Cassandra or whatever her name was manipulated me, humiliated me, and I was too naive to suspect it was all a scam until it was too late. He smiled bitterly. I'm a gamer and I hate being lied to. He nodded at Marcus. Elder brother thinks that we can outmaneuver these two and says that you are the right person to help us do this. He already said that you agreed, but I would like to ask in person. Now that you know the whole backstory, are you still ready? She thought for a moment. No violence, no breaking the law. Seth shook his head decisively. No way. I wouldn't risk you, my brother, or myself for that matter. And just as importantly, I don't want to win this game this way. No cheat codes for me. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said calmly, I'm still in business. Great. Seth said eagerly, and Cersei noticed a smile of relief flash across Marcus's face. Suddenly Seth rose from the table. Sorry, but I need to end the evening early to catch the last flight to San Jose. You two stay as long as you like. I've already paid the bill. He reached across the table to shake Cersei's hand, then hugged Marcus tightly again. Take care of yourself, brother, and disappeared. They stayed at the table, finishing dessert. Marcus looked at his partner as he sipped his espresso. I think we are as ready as we can be. So pack your bags tomorrow. We're leaving for New York tomorrow night. He handed her the flight confirmation, and she looked at him thoughtfully. You must have been confident that I wouldn't change my mind. He looked at her seriously. No, I'm just an optimist. I've already heard that somewhere, she grinned. On the way home in the limousine, she looked at her flight confirmation again. Well, come what may. Once they arrived in New York, Marcus moved into a pied-à-terre that Seth owned on the east side, and Cersei moved into a furnished apartment on the west side that they were able to rent. Despite being tired from the flight, she went shopping in the morning to buy a few necessary things, and in the afternoon she took a taxi to the place they called Jethro's house. When she entered, Marcus was talking to a stranger. Cersei, meet Jerry Vaughn, my partner. He was here in New York keeping an eye on our favorite scammers. And of course, he'll be your target in our first scene. The three of them sat down in the living room to discuss next steps. They eat dinner on a pretty regular schedule, and the forecast for tomorrow is good, Jerry said. I think we should try tomorrow night. Cersei was taken aback for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. It's just excitement before the premiere. You can do it, girl. Marcus seemed to notice her reaction. Robert is confident, like most scammers, and you are attractive enough to attract his attention. You just have to play the part right. He saw hesitation in her eyes. I know you can do it, Cersei. Remember, Jerry is here to make things easier for you, and I will monitor everything from afar and give you instructions through the earpiece. She nodded. He smiled encouragingly. And Cersei, she looked at him questioningly, no fluff or feather. From his vantage point at the Time Warner Center, Marcus watched through binoculars as Benedict strolled through Central Park toward Columbus Circle. He checked where Cersei was, noticing her near the Columbus statue. On the other side of the monument, Jerry was walking along the path, approaching the exit from the park. Marcus picked up the phone and whispered, We're starting 2 minutes. Cersei immediately headed across the square towards the American Sailors Memorial. On the other side of the monument, Jerry walked out through the gate. Keeping Robert in sight, Cersei timed her steps to intersect with Jerry right in front of their target. When they accidentally collided, Marcus was relieved to note that Cersei's performance was flawless. After Jerry returned his wallet and sharply reprimanded Cersei for her clumsiness, she hurriedly retreated through the gates into Central Park. Seeing Robert turn and follow her, Marcus had to resist the urge to shout loudly in joy. Between the trees and the darkness, it was difficult for Marcus to see what was happening, but Cersei stopped under a street lamp, which helped, and he could barely make out Benedict talking to her. Unable to hear their conversation, he waited until they had dispersed before gathering his binoculars and heading to his spot on the east side. An hour later, Cersei appeared at his door. When he let her in, she began to excitedly walk around the room, literally jumping for joy. I did it, she exclaimed. Both heists went perfectly, and I played the grumpy little pickpocket perfectly. If only someone would film this. What about your partnership proposal? Her smile faded for a moment. He's cautious, but I think he bought it. Now the question is whether Cassandra will accept him. Now he smiled. I think you underestimate yourself. You've made a statement, you've come up with a compelling idea, and you're one hell of a salesperson. I think we're in business. I hope you're right, she said, but her eyes were shining. As it turns out, Marcus's prediction was absolutely correct. After meeting at the Essex House Hotel, Stephen and Cassandra were clearly fascinated by the prospect of the biggest scam of their lives. After this, Cersei easily led them to a meeting with Jethro, and now it was Marcus's turn to show off his acting skills. The only surprise for Cersei was how convincingly Marcus played the role of Jethro. Everything from his appearance to his manner of speech reinforced the impression of an intelligent but naive young man who had decided to leave his village life behind. He missed his calling, Cersei marveled as she watched his top-notch performance over dinner. He plays much better than some Hollywood actors I've seen on screen, and these are the ones who got the main roles. Apparently, Cassandra also believed, and the relationship between her and Jet quickly moved to a new level. At the same time, Cersei continued her secret connection with Stephen. Even though she despised the man for his manipulation of others, she hid her personal feelings and fully embraced the role. One day, when she and Marcus had a couple of minutes to discuss, she admitted that she particularly enjoyed the way she manipulated Stephen and ruined his long relationship with Cassandra. I guess I still have a little Jezebel in me, she said with a smile. Now it's Marcus' turn. First, he, as Jethro, had to convince Ellen Cassandra that he was crazy about her. Fortunately, she was no less ready for this than he was, so his unexpected wedding proposal met with approval. Jethro would then overwhelm her with an offer to sign a prenuptial agreement, causing anger and disappointment among the conmen. We always had two key things in our plan, Marcus Circe said shortly before announcing the prenuptial agreement to Ellen. The first is to convince them to take on Jethro. The second is to convince them to commit to an investment scheme. Do you really think they'll believe this fake Goldman Sachs account? Cersei asked excitedly. It's not fake, he assured her. If they check it, they will actually find that there is $60 million in there. Isn't it risky? He smiled. No, Seth thought of everything. Firstly, the account is frozen. No one will be able to withdraw money without his permission. Secondly, at noon on my wedding day, he transfers all the money from the account mine and what Cassandra and Stephen contributed to a new one, which they know nothing about. Then his face became serious. But all of this will only work if you can convince them to change their plans. Now Cersei smiled. I think it's pretty compelling, but this deal could have been sold by anyone. Their original scheme, in which they planned to get half of the $60 million, had already made them drool. Now, if they don't agree to the new plan, there won't be a wedding, and they've wasted a lot of time and money on a failed scam. On the other hand, if they accept the new plan, they will have a chance to steal all $60 million. She nodded confidently. These two are greedy as hell, I think I can sell it. Her confidence turned out to be completely justified. The two scammers accepted the changed plan, and soon the wedding date was set. Early on the morning of the wedding, Marcus met with Cersei and Jerry to go over all the details once again. Everything depends on the exact timing, he emphasized as they went through all the steps of the plan. Jerry, you're the one who has to pull this off. I got it, Marcus. Sears, I was almost delighted. Stop worrying, Marcus. Now everything will go like clockwork. Our two fish are hooked. The hooks are deeply embedded, and all we have to do today is pull them out. I think you're probably right, but there's always a chance of surprise. You worry too much, partner. Okay, but do me a favor. Keep a close eye on Cassandra. She never liked you, and lately she's made a couple of snarky remarks that hint that she suspects that you and Robert might be getting close, if you know what I mean. Either way, once the scam is over, she will want to split you up as quickly as possible, so be careful. Yes, Captain, Cersei answered cheerfully. Okay, I have to get dressed. I have a wedding today. Everything started as expected. The small salon was decorated with an arch and altar. A huge number of flowers were placed around the walls. The hotel staff was ready to serve the guests at the reception, and the priest from Arkansas arrived in advance, ready to perform the ceremony. And then the fun began. While Jethro distracted Samuel, Jerry, dressed in work clothes, was already in the old man's room, picking the lock. As soon as the door opened, he hurried to his computer, opened an account at Goldman Sachs, and sent the transfer order that Marcus had given him. After the page reloaded and the old account balance was reset to 0, Jerry quickly left the room, leaving a lock on the door so that it would not close completely. He then quickly took the elevator down to the lobby, turned it off, and hung a "elevator out of service" sign in front of the door. Finally, he sent a message to Marcus, and he felt a vibration in his pocket. Marcus immediately turned to Sarah and asked her to keep Ellen in her room. Sarah agreed and hurried to the elevators. Seeing her, Jerry folded the sign, went into the elevator, and turned it on again. "Is everything ready?" she asked quietly, entering the elevator. He nodded. "Don't forget," he added, "after my signal, you will have 78 seconds. As soon as she reached Ellen's door, she put on a worried expression and started knocking. When the bride-to-be opened the door, Sarah hurried inside. "Something's wrong," she whispered worriedly. "I went into Sam's room to check on something, and the door was ajar. He was sitting at the computer, doing something. I walked closer and saw him fiddling with Jethro's Goldman Sachs account. I tried to ask him what was going on, but he yelled at me and told me to leave. Then he ran out of the room and jumped into the elevator. I couldn't catch up with him, so I came to you." "What the hell?" Ellen exclaimed. "He shouldn't have done anything before the wedding. We need to check this immediately." Both women hurried into the hallway and up to Sam's floor. The door to his room was still ajar, and Sarah led Ellen to her open laptop. "Look," she said, "the Goldman Sachs website is still open." Seeing that Jethro's Goldman Sachs account had a 0 balance, Ellen quickly opened a new window and logged into First Caribbean Bank. Their new joint account balance was also 0. "That damned rascal," she screamed. "He must have withdrawn money from Goldman early somehow. He took everything for himself." Sarah reached into her pocket and pressed the send button. A moment later, her phone rang. "Oh, hi, Jethro. No, I don't know. Did he do it? This doesn't make sense. Listen, I'm here with Ellen. Wait until we get down." She hung up and looked at the bride. It was Jethro. He said Sam just ran out of the lobby, jumped into a taxi, and drove off. The doorman was heard telling the driver that he needed to go to JFK Airport. "What's happening?" Ellen cursed when she heard the news and then stormed out of the room, racing towards the elevators. "Where are you going?" Sarah shouted after her, pretending to be confused. "I need to stop him before he gets on the plane. If he flies away, we will never find him or the money again," Ellen screamed. At that moment, the elevator door opened. Ellen quickly entered and pressed the button for the first floor. The doors closed before Sarah could catch up with her. Sarah immediately sent another message and ran back to her room, counting down to herself. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Returning to her room, she took a pistol with a silencer from her huge Louis Vuitton bag and shot at the pillow. Then she hid the pillow under the bed, put the gun in a visible place, ran to the computer, and closed the First Caribbean window. She also checked that the Goldman Sachs website was still open. After that, she quickly went to the bathroom, pulled out a bottle containing 500 milliliters of theater blood from her bag, and poured it on the tiled floor, then hid the bag and bottle under the sink. At the 70th Mississippi, she carefully lay down in the spreading blood, closed her eyes, and began to relax, as she did during her acting training. Just a few seconds later, Jethro and Samuel cautiously entered the room. Upon discovering the gun, Samuel noticed that his laptop was still open on the Goldman Sachs website, where the balance was 0. Meanwhile, Jethro discovered Sarah's body and declared her dead. As both men stood there in shock, Reverend Rowe called to inform Jethro that Ellen had just hailed a taxi to JFK Airport. Hearing this, Samuel cursed, ran out of the room to the elevators, and went straight to the lobby. He quickly jumped into a taxi, heading to the airport, and, without ceasing, cursed everything. Jethro watched him leave, then fell to his knees in the lobby. "It's over," he whispered. "I can't believe it, it's all over." Someone's hand touched his shoulder. "Yes, it's over, boss, and we did it." A happy voice rang out, and Marcus looked up, seeing Circe standing in front of him in a hotel robe covering her bloody dress. Marcus immediately jumped to his feet and hugged her in relief. "Damn, Circe, you were damn convincing. My heart sank when I saw you lying so still. How did you do it?" She grinned. "When I played a dead girl on a true crime show, I had to play dead for a lot longer. The only thing I was worried about was convincing Ellen to go into Sam's room to look at his computer and find an empty Goldman account. But it seems she didn't trust him because there were no problems. And when I told her he was heading to the airport, she ran like crazy." She looked to the side, seeing Jerry approaching. "You did a perfect job with the elevator. Marcus and Samuel must have been going up while Ellen was going down." "Well done, you three," another voice said, and they both looked up to see Reverend Rowe standing nearby. He walked up to Marcus, hugged him tightly, then gently hugged Circe and shook Jerry's hand. Then, to cheers, he removed the fake beard and makeup, revealing the face of Marcus' brother, Seth. Marcus shook his head. "I was starting to get nervous when Benedict thought he recognized you, but it seems like everything went well." Seth smiled. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Then his face became serious. "But I think it's time for you two to get out of here before someone starts asking awkward questions. I have a limousine ready to take you to Teterboro, where a private jet will take you to Los Angeles." "What about Jerry?" asked Marcus. "I'm heading to the 113th precinct, where they'll be taken after they're arrested at the airport," Jerry replied. "I know a few police officers there, so I can get news about our two friends." "But why?" Circe began, but Jerry anticipated her question. "After they left, I made a call as a concerned citizen to inform the airport that an armed man and an angry woman were heading there. They'll be arrested pretty quickly." He winked at the others. "New York has the strictest gun laws in the country. Carrying an unregistered loaded weapon is a felony with a minimum sentence of 3.5 years. Marcus nodded in satisfaction. Then he thought for a moment and pointed to the petit salon and the preparations for the wedding. "Okay, but what about all this?" Seth waved his hand. "I'll be staying in New York for a few more days, so I'll take care of everything here. You two go change into your traveling clothes and jump into the limousine." Marcus hugged Seth tightly. "Thank you, little brother." "No, thank you, big brother. Everything turned out even better than I hoped." He then headed to the front desk. Once Marcus and Circe were comfortably seated in the Gulfstream and the seatbelt sign dimmed, a steward offered drinks. Marcus ordered champagne to celebrate their success. Sipping his drink, he looked at Circe with a serious expression. "Now that our big scam is over, will you return to acting?" She stared out the window for a few seconds before turning to him. Initially, I planned it that way, but now I'm not sure. This whole experience was so exciting. After this, participating in castings will be a real disappointment. Now she noticed that he was looking at his glass, avoiding her gaze. You know, I thought you and I made a pretty good team, he said quietly. Maybe we should continue. A smile touched her lips, and she reached out to touch his palm. I might like this. They sat in silence for a few minutes, and then Marcus broke the silence. I have to confess something to you. I know it was part of the job, but when you and Robert started getting serious, I was a little jealous. He blushed, and she noticed it. She leaned closer to him. I have my confession, Marcus. Remember how you checked on me in your office? He nodded, blushing again. She smiled. I wasn't pretending. 2 days later, they were sitting in the office of Masterson's agency when Marcus' phone rang. Hey, little brother, he said when he heard a familiar voice. Cersei here, so I'll put you on speaker and you can tell us both what's going on. Seth's voice sounded a little tinny over the phone speaker, but it was obvious he was in a good mood. Jerry found out what happened to Cassandra and Stephen. They were both arrested at LaGuardia Airport for disorderly conduct, possession of an unregistered firearm, and resisting arrest. They appeared to have had an argument, and it took 4 police officers to break them up. When they were brought in for questioning, Stephen accused Cassandra of murder. But when detectives contacted the Essex House Hotel, there was no body in Stephen's room. Then they accused each other of theft, but none of them wanted to say where the money came from. Cassandra tried to convince the police to interview Jethro as a witness, but when they arrived at Essex House, he was not there. They then went to his apartment and found out that it did not belong to him. And when they contacted the Little Rock police, they found no Jethro Malone or the chicken farm he was talking about. By that point, it was clear that Cassandra and Stephen were in trouble, and they stopped testifying. But police began sending their fingerprints and photographs to other stations, and that led to several requests from police departments across the country. Now both are sitting on Rikers Island, and Jerry thinks they will be there for quite a long time. As Reverend Rowe would say, it looks like their chickens have come home. So, Marcus asked, are you going back to Silicon Valley? Not yet. I have one task that needs to be completed before I leave, but I have another offer for you too if you're interested. Marcus looked at Cersei and she nodded eagerly. What do you have for us? Remember that money that Stephen and Cassandra transferred to Jethro's account at Goldman, that $250,000. You mean your money that they swindled you out of? Marcus reminded me. Exactly, Seth agreed. Well, I already said that getting my money back was never the main goal. Now that the game is over, I would like to use these funds to make amends to other people who were deceived by these two. Can you arrange this? Wow, Seth, that couple got more money out of you than anyone else. Are you sure you want to do this? Cersei asked. Yes, I think this is the right decision. And besides, Seth added, tomorrow I'll get what I really want. The next day, Cassandra Simmons was notified that she had a visitor named Tobias Rowe. The name meant nothing to her, but any distraction from the monotony of life on Rikers Island was welcome for her, so she agreed to the meeting. When she was led into the visiting room, the man waiting for her seemed vaguely familiar to her, but she could not remember where she had seen him. Hello, Cassandra, he said pleasantly. Or are you Emma, Ellen, Lorelei now? I can't keep up with you. She ignored his question. Who the hell are you? You don't recognize me? He pretended to be offended. I'm Reverend Rowe from Little Rock. I should have married you before all this happened. Listen, if you were sitting in this damn hole, it would be difficult for you to even recognize your own mother, she snapped. Then she looked at him more closely. Why are you here, preacher? My duty as a man of God is to comfort the afflicted, he said serenely, and she looked at him with contempt. But I'm also here to give you a message from Jethro. This caught her attention. Jethro, where is he? I need to see him. Without waiting for an answer, she continued, Listen, Jet is rich, he could help me get out of here. She covered her face with her hands. Her voice trembled as if she was about to burst into sobs. We loved each other and were going to get married. It's the least he could do for me. The man on the other side of the glass partition sat silently, his face remaining impassive. When she realized that he was not going to react to her speech, her tone again became cold and indifferent as before. So, what's Jethro's message? Now there was a faint smile on the man's face. He wanted you to know that you lost. What are you talking about? You and Stephen were good. You deceived a lot of people, defrauded them of a lot of money. But in the end, you were defeated by someone who was better than you. Seth just wanted you to feel what it was like to lose. Was this redneck from Arkansas part of the scam? Now he smiled. Jet Malone is not from Arkansas, Cassandra. In fact, Jet Malone doesn't exist at all, as does Sarah McMullen, your accomplice. At the mention of Sarah's name, Cassandra's eyes lit up. The man's smile now grew into a wide grin. To be honest, I don't exist either. And as soon as I leave here today, you will never see us again. Her mind still couldn't comprehend the full implications of his words. Were you all in on this? That's right, Cassandra. It was all a scam from the very beginning. And you and Stephen were a complete failure. He laughed. As they say in Mortal Kombat, flawless victory. Standing up, he turned to leave. Bastard! Bastard! She shouted after him. When he came out, she began pounding on the glass with her hand. Who are you? Who are you? She screamed until the guard took her away. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.